Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the used car market because we have some pretty big updates. Before we get into the video though, as always, if you're going to save time and money, the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. So Cox Automotive just posted their big data report of what happened in the used car market during the sales month of January. And the data completely supports what I have been saying about how the used car market is kind of flipping to an extent. And so let's dive into it. So the first big data point is that used car prices increased by about 2.5% in January. Now this is seasonally adjusted, and Cox Automotive also has an increase that is not seasonally adjusted, which is by 1.5%. So either way you look at it, used car prices went up in the sales month of January. However, if you take the seasonally adjusted amount, that means that used car prices are down by about 12.8% compared to January of 2022. And then if you take away the seasonal adjustment, then they're down by about 11% compared to January of 2022. So what that means is that used cars are now more expensive today than what they were back in December, but they're less expensive today than what they were back in January of 2022. And again, this is perfectly supporting what I have been saying, where dealers have been stepping up on trade-in numbers because the used car market's kind of in this weird like flatline position, and a 1.5% increase in values kind of signifies that the used car market's somewhat flattened out. Now, the next numbers in the report come from the Manheim auction, and the first number is that cars on average at auction were 1.2% more expensive, and the average car at auction sold for 99.9% of the current market value, which means that cars at auction are also more expensive. It's not just cars on the retail side of things. And when cars are selling at auction, they're basically selling at current auction values. They're not selling for over auction value, and they're not selling for under auction value. Again, 99.9%. That is pretty much as close as you can get. But the next big piece of news from auction is that the sales conversion rate is 59.4%. Now, if you compare that to pre-pandemic levels, which is 57.7% stated in this report of January of 2019, that means that cars are selling like crazy at auction. So if anyone's saying that cars are not selling at auction, they are completely full of BS, because right now, cars are selling at auction at a faster rate, at a better rate compared to what we saw prior to the pandemic. Now, the next part of this report breaks down how much each segment has gone down in value over the course of the year. And if you guys want to know the segments that have lost the most amount of value, luxury cars, 14.9%. This is something I've talked about in the channel, where it feels like luxury cars are just losing tons of value. Mid-size cars, 14.2%. CUVs and SUVs, 14.8%. If you guys are wondering, the segment that has lost the least amount of value is pickup trucks, which is crazy because pickup trucks are super expensive, but they've lost 8.4% year over year. And I think the reason why used pickup trucks have lost the least amount of value is because new pickup trucks have increased in price by so much that it's like pulled up the values of the used ones, because there's a lot of people that just can't afford the new ones, and so they go into the used market. And if you have more people going to the used market, that's naturally going to increase prices. And now this is where things get very, very interesting. So used car sales increased by 16% in January of 2023 compared to December of 2022, which is crazy because December is always like the biggest sales month of the year, and January was a bigger sales month for used cars than it was in December. If you guys are wondering, January of 2023 was 5% greater than January of 2022 in terms of sales volume. So like year over year, January was up with used car sales. And so this actually puts us in a pretty interesting position in the used car market, because closing out, January has a used car supply of 44 days at the end, whereas December last month, or not last month, the month before last month. Anyways, 56-day supply, and then January of 2022 had a 60-day supply of used cars. So the used car market is more constrained today than what it was back in January of 2022, when there was still quite a bit of euphoria in the market, where people were still paying crazy prices I know that this video is about the used car market, but I quickly want to talk about the new car market for just a second because they did mention it in this report. And this is kind of more of the final number, which I'll dive more into this in its own individual video. But anyways, new vehicle sales were down 18.6% from December, which is what is expected because December is always a huge sales month for new cars. But even though new car sales were down compared to December, they were up compared to January of 2022. I've already talked about this in prior videos, and so this still puts us on track with these final numbers to sell more cars in 2023 on the new car side of things compared to 2022. Now that we've gone over the data, let's talk about what this is going to do to the used car market in the short term and in the long term as well, and just explain this whole situation overall. So I know a lot of people will be tempted to say dead cat bounce, right? But what you have to understand is that the used car market is not the stock market. Used car prices are determined based on supply and demand, right? Cars are just a form of transportation. And right now we are entering into a market where supply is dwindling and demand is yet again increasing. That is exactly what the data suggests. There are more used cars selling and there's less supply happening on the market. So again, prices are going to go up. And this is happening for a number of reasons. First off, new car manufacturing is still not up to what it was like prior to the pandemic. And so new car availability is definitely better today than what it was last year, but it's still not good enough. And on top of that, new car automakers have increased the prices on their cars by such an astronomical amount that it's pushing a lot of people out of the new car market. And again, the data suggests this because we had a January where used car sales were up and new car sales were down compared to December, which suggests that people are more interested in buying a used car than a new car. And I think a great way to explain this is by talking about like a real world example. So let's say that you're looking at a Ford F-150 XLT. If you want to buy a brand new Ford F-150 XLT that's nicely optioned out, you're going to have to spend somewhere in the mid $60,000 range for that pickup truck. Now, let's say that you're looking on the used truck market and there is a used F-150 XLT with some miles. Even if that used F-150 XLT is selling for close to original MSRP, that'll still be significantly less than what you would be able to buy the brand new one for if you paid MSRP for the brand new one, because, well, the MSRP of that used one is probably going to be somewhere in the, mid 50s to low 50s, again, depending on the model year and all that kind of stuff. But the point that I'm trying to make is even if these used cars are selling for at their original MSRP or close to their original MSRP, they're still going to be significantly less expensive than the brand new versions with the MSRP increases that we've seen over the course of the last year. I mean, there are some vehicles like the Ford F-150 Lightning that literally saw a price increase of like 40%. Now that was definitely on the high side of things, but most cars saw an MSRP increase of at least 10 to sometimes 20%. And so again, this is putting upward pressure on the used car market because like the new ones, they're just too expensive. So what I see happening moving forward is that this is only going to continue to increase as time goes on because again, these new car prices, they aren't coming down anytime soon. I'm sure we're going to see more and more manufacturer incentives as inventories build up, but it's still going to take quite a bit of time for inventories to build up. Yes, there are some brands where they have quite a bit of inventory at this point, like Stellantis brands, for example. But there are other brands that still don't have a lot of inventory. I mean, go to a Honda dealership. You might find a few cars on the lot, but nowhere near what you saw prior to the pandemic. Same thing with Toyota, Lexus. I mean, I could name a bunch of brands where they have cars now, but they still don't have enough cars for the manufacturer to even think about posting any sort of incentives or for dealers to think about discounting cars. And so when you have this situation where there's still a small enough supply that there's no need for the manufacturers to post incentives, then yeah, again, people are going to pull back and they're going to go and buy used because it's like, oh, well, the brand new one's $60,000. This used one's $40,000. Yeah, original MSRP is $40,000, but $40,000 is all I can afford. So I'm going to go buy the used one. And so over the short term, this trend is going to continue. Like, I will not be shocked if we go through the sales month of February and used car prices increase yet again, and if supply is down and if used car sales are up. Now, obviously, it's going to eventually reach some sort of a peak, and I don't see this as like a huge run-up like what we saw during the course of the pandemic, but rather I see this as like a stabilization over the next few months, and we're going to see a little bit of an uptick from month to month. It's not going to be massive, right? It's going to be like, maybe 0.5% one month, maybe 1% the next month, but it's still going to be in the upwards direction rather than in the downwards direction. But long term, I do see prices eventually going through another correction once new car availability is much better and once manufacturers start putting incentives on new cars to bring down those prices, because once we see big enough incentives to offset the price increases that we've seen over the course of the last couple of years, then this will, bring people back into the new car market, because they'll be like, okay, well, like let's say with that Ford F-150 XLT, let's say that, today you can only buy one for MSRP and it's $65,000, but maybe by the end of the year, let's say that Ford releases some sort of big incentive and you can get $10,000 off of MSRP. So now it's $55,000 instead of $65,000, and the used one's $50,000. Well, then you're going to have a lot of people that go from, oh, it's $15,000 more to, oh, it's actually only going to be $5,000 more. I'd rather spend $5,000 more and get the brand new truck with the full warranty. So anyways, let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. Let me know what your game plan is moving forward. And it's a crazy market out there. It's going all over the place. And I've noticed a trend where a lot of channels have kind of pulled back from talking about the car market because it's no longer in massive decline. So they can't make their super flashy fun, and I do the same thing, super flashy fun thumbnails of the car market is collapsing, because it's not anymore. But I think that it's just as important to talk about the car market today, like with what's happening right now, in the same time frame as it's important to talk about it when values are declining a massive amount, because there's still, mistakes that could be made in either market. When a market's declining, there's mistakes to be made, and when a market is doing what it's doing right now, there are also mistakes that could be made. And so let's hope that this educates everyone enough so that you don't make mistakes. Anyways, see you.